Hello and welcome. Today I am going to make a Thanksgiving reveal wheel card without any specialty interactive die sets. So I'm starting off with this hilarious stamp set. It's a Thanksgiving stamp set from Scrappiness, part of the Gobble release. This one is it has a stamp and coordinating die to go along with it. And what I'm doing here, this is one of 3 turkey images in this stamp set, and the turkey is holding a sign. And the stamp, it's a blank sign for a reason, because actually, as it turns out, quite a few of the sentiments that are in this stamp set will actually fit into or onto this sign. So what I'm doing is carefully trying to cut out this sign. So after I trimmed around the border, I just slashed a diagonal through the center. That way I can use my fussy cutting fine tip scissors to just trim around the turkey's hands, which for me, those curves are a little bit harder to manage with my big utility blade. So getting the little snippers in there is much more manageable, where the straight lines I can manage to do with my my larger utility blade. So once I've cut this out, I am going to just with a brush marker, you can use a Sharpie pen if you want. I just want to take away, that white core of the paper, because that will clean up my cut lines a little bit, and as you can see, it just makes the whole thing look a little bit neater. And this will be the little aperture opening where, as we turn the wheel, the sentiments that come included in the stamp set that will fit into or onto that sign are going to be what rotates around. And so this will be a really fun interaction. What I've already gone ahead and done is die cut out a scalloped, using a scalloped circle die, my wheel. And the scalloped circles is nice because those scallop edges make for kind of a nice place to grip and turn the wheel. So what I'll do is I just punched a 1/8 inch hole through the center of my scallop circle. To find the center, I did use the same die cut it out of just some copy paper, and then I folded the copy paper into quarters, and use that copy paper to determine the center point. With this circle, the smaller circle, it doesn't really matter what size it is. I just have a punch that I think was 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches. You just want it to be large enough so that you can put some adhesive onto it, because that's what gets attached to your card base. And the scallop circle is going to be held onto that smaller circle with a brad. If you have a mini brad, that would be perfect. And it's going to remain unattached to anything, and that's the key, because that's the wheel that will spin. What I'm doing is rotating. I'm placing my turkey where I think it will need to be relative to this wheel, and I traced out that aperture opening. So that gives me an idea for where I can safely stamp my sentiments in order for it to show through that aperture. Now, if I had to do it over again, what I would do is temporarily tape down my mechanism, which I did. That allows me to be able to spin the wheel, and it keeps it anchored so that it's not shifting. But I think the key is to also anchor your turkey so that that is also not shifting around. I was trying to hold it in one place, but obviously I probably moved a little bit at some point, because you'll see on my final card, some of my stamped sentiments were positioned just a smidge off. So that is likely because I was moving my turkey just a smidge. Still visible through the aperture mostly, I would say like around 80-90%, more than that, maybe 90-95%, but they weren't like perfectly centered. So, enough was visible for it to be legible, but it wasn't like the absolute most ideal positioning. So I would recommend maybe somehow taping your turkey feet down a little bit so that you can spin your wheel behind it. I'll show you what I mean in a bit, because I actually ended up doing it later, and then I realized, I should have done that when I was marking out the safe zone for stamping. So what I've gone ahead and done is, from the Gobble paper pad that also released, I trimmed down a panel that's going to go on top of the wheel and hide the mechanism. What I want to do, though, before anything else, is punch through. Now, I'm just using a 3/4 inch punch. You could probably stand to use a larger punch if you have. Maybe a 1 inch, I think, would be nice too. And what I want to do is punch through the front of my card base and through my pattern paper. So the card base, our mechanism, reveal wheel mechanism, will go in between these two layers. And it's nice to have this notched out so that your wheel kind of stands out a little bit better. It's easier to grab that wheel to spin it. And what I'll do is just give myself some pencil marks so I know where to line everything up when I go to actually glue these bits down. And that way I can figure out the placement of everything temporarily. But here's where I mark out where I need to cut through this panel, because we have the aperture cut through our turkey, but we need a little aperture window through that pattern paper in order for the sentiment that's on the wheel to come through. So here's where I tacked down, just with some temporary low-tack tape, my card panel to the card base. And this is what I should have done when I was marking out safe zones for stamping. Used, just some low-tack tape at the feet of the turkey so that I can keep that positioned in a static position. So that's one thing. When I do this over again, I would do that differently. So, hopefully you can learn from my mistake. So I'm going to erase all of my pencil marks, because I did draw that little aperture window border onto this wheel, and those pencil marks will be visible. So I want to take a moment to get rid of those. Here I used, now what you see me placing on here is my low profile foam, and that was a little bit of a mistake also. Off camera I corrected it because I didn't think you would need to see it over again. But the reason why is because it's too thin. You want a foam that's going to be at least as thick as the head of your brad. That way you're not pinching down on the brad and everything can kind of still move and spin freely. So just use a slightly thicker foam. You're just aiming for a foam that is as thick as the head of your brad. That's all there was to it. But you do want to make sure that you're only putting adhesive on that smaller circle, because we want the scallop circle to be able to spin. And I drew out where I needed to cut my little aperture window. This can be slightly larger than the aperture that we cut out of the turkey die cut. And that's because our turkey will cover that. So if you want to err on one side, you want to err on the side of being slightly larger than the line that you traced out. Now I'm going to add some rather thick adhesive foam, and that's because this is going to be our top panel, which is going to cover our mechanism. And of course, I applied it to the front of my panel. You want to put your foam on the back of your panel. Thank goodness this paper does have a little bit of a glossy coating. So I did manage to peel it up without it tearing the paper at all. But I'm just putting foam on the four corners because we don't want to put any adhesive or anything that will obstruct the movement of our wheel. And the reason why it needs to be a slightly thicker foam is because it does need to be thicker than the head of your brad, plus that layer of cardstock that is your wheel. And then where the legs of your brad close, maybe that adds a little bit of extra dimension too. So you don't want this to be so tightly pinched down that it adds a lot of friction and makes it hard to spin the wheel. So that's why I used a slightly thicker foam there. And please excuse the black and white markings on my hand. I learned a trick from a fellow design team member on another team that to get your white gel pen to flow nicely, scribble on your skin. And it works. So I love that. And I tried that with my black glaze pen too. And that because I was adding some extra little accents to my turkey. And so it definitely does help to scribble a little bit on your skin just to get that gel flowing. So totally awesome pro tip from a fellow crafter. Now here on the back of my turkey, I am putting some low profile foam. With all of the foam that I'm using, this is going to be a rather thick card. It may trigger extra postage. So when I put this in the mail, I'm just going to assume that it requires some extra postage and add that little bit of extra when I go to send it out. So this is about as far as I planned in advance. So now seeing my turkey there, and he seems a little bit plain on the card by himself. So I cut a strip of solid brown just to ground him so he has something to stand on. I used this is a really cool nesting die set. It's the oval rope nesting die set from Cat Scrappiness, and it's got some lovely detail around the borders. So that's really awesome. And I want to use that as a little speech bubble. Because I don't have a speech bubble die from Cat Scrappiness, so I'm just gonna hand cut, that little triangle that you often see as part of speech bubbles. So it's a not too complicated thing to hand cut. So I added that, and I love the sentiment. I used all of the sentiments that I love, and it's the reason why I chose this card design, because I just love all of the things that you can put onto that turkey's sign that he's holding. And so in the speech bubble, the sentiment reads, "You want to put the stuffing where?" And so he's saying that while holding a sign, giving you some alternatives of other things to eat for Thanksgiving so he can avoid whatever your plans are with stuffing him. I just love this stamp set so much, and I think it's going to be one that I use every year. I just need to alternate who I send the card to so that the same person doesn't get tired of the joke. But I just really, really love this. So as you turn the wheel, it goes through all of the different alternatives. This one's cute. Don't pick me. And then we get eat ham, eat chicken, go vegan. And the one that fit the best is this one. I love vegetarians. So really, really adorable. Super fun card to put together. And as you saw, you don't really need any specialty dies. It is a little bit tough to kind of cut your aperture out of the turkey, but really that was the hardest part. Afterwards, everything was kind kind of pretty straightforward. So, and even though I didn't get perfect placement with my stamped sentiment, it was kind of, pretty close enough. So, love how that turned out. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked this card, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.